I was a third-year student in veterinary school at the University of Missouri, and it was a Christmas time, 1963, and all the professors were gone, and I was working as a student tech in the pathology department to get paid so I could work my way through veterinary school. We were just poor farmers in Missouri. And a farmer came by during that time, and he brought 50 dead lambs and threw them on the floor. His dump truck, he dumped these 50 dead lambs. They're about 6 months old. And I said, oh my gosh, what happened? All the professors are gone. I'm there by myself. He said, well, yesterday, I fed all my lambs. They're 6 months old. And then after Christmas, we're going to shear them and sell the wool. And then after New Year's, we're going to take them all to be slaughtered and make our money that way. And so yesterday, I was feeding them as we were doing, and feeding the 500 lambs, and they're jumping in and out of the feed bunks or following the truck and wagon and so forth. And it's all wonderful. And this morning I went to feed them again. They're all dead. They all died at night, 500. And he said, I'm just shocked. I said, okay, well, let me ask you a couple of questions. I said, because their blood is black, not dark red, but black. I think this is due to nitrate poisoning. Do you have farms around you also? He said, yes. I said, do they have livestock? No. And they all grow hay and corn and that kind of stuff. I said, okay, soybeans, okay. And so do they use nitrate fertilizer? Oh, yeah, they all use nitrate fertilizer because they get paid by tonnage. They don't get paid by the nutritional value of the food. They get paid by tonnage. Okay. So I want samples of the water, which he called up, and they brought samples of the water over. And sure enough, the water was just loaded with nitrates. And those lambs have been drinking that water for 6 months, and their body's saturated with nitrates. They had goiter. Their thyroid was definitely impacted by the nitrates. Okay, it's an anti-thyroid substance, nitrates. And so they couldn't tolerate what happened. What happened that night, and in central Missouri where that farm was, it's not unusual in December to be 45 degrees, 50 degrees, 38 degrees, 60 degrees, that kind of stuff. But that night that they all died, the temperature dropped to 16. It went from 45 the day before, 16, and they all died of hypothermia. And so that's because their thyroids were dead because of the chronic nitrate poisoning, and they all died of hypothermia. I wrote this up, and I went to Africa to work on the White Rhino Conservation Project. That's another story for another day. But after 2 years, Perkins, from Marlon Perkins, the old Mutual Mohawk Kingdom show, had taken my paper that I wrote on those 500 lambs dying. It was published in a veterinary journal, my first scientific publication. I was very proud of that. I really didn't get the title very exciting. It was called Hypothyroidism in Feeder Lambs. That doesn't give you the importance of that study, hypothyroidism in feeder lambs. So anyway, he gets this grant for $25 million for me to come back and do a study in zoo animals and look for zoo animals sensitive to the same pollutants that humans are. So if they start dying like the canary in the mine, the coal miners knew to get out, well, that was the whole project was about. It was an NIH study, National Institutes of Health study. But Perkins gave me this list. He says, this is my list. Before you start to study, which will be maybe in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month, I want you to find out the answer to these questions. He said, every species of bears in every country in the world and every zoo in the world are dying at half their life expectancy. They can live to be 60 years old. They're all dying at 15, 20 years of age from liver cancer. I said, really? So I said, well, give me a couple of days. And it didn't take me long. It took me a couple of days to look it up. Sure enough, I figured out what was happening. What was happening was, and this is very important here, based on our question on smoking, okay, these bears were, some of the prime exhibits in all the big zoos around the world. They're omnivores. They eat a lot of different things, and so they're kind of easy to keep. Every zoo in the world would sell peanuts to get money to pay their zookeepers and also to buy food for the bears and the elephants and the porpoises and the wombats and the kangaroos and so forth. And all these bears are getting this liver cancer. Well, that's because they were selling these peanuts. These people are throwing the peanuts to the bears. The bears learned if they stood on their back legs and waved their paws at the crowd would throw the peanuts at them. They'd get the peanuts. And the ones that were learning to beg for the peanuts were the ones that got the liver cancer. Well, why is that? Well, because peanuts grow in the ground. Almonds, tree nuts of all kinds, pistachios, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They all grow on trees. But peanuts grow on the ground, and they're infested with a fungus very commonly, like 90% of the time. They're infested with a fungus called Aspergillus flavus. And Aspergillus flavus produces a toxin called aflatoxin, which causes liver cancer. Now, when people get liver cancer. And the doctors say, well, do you drink alcohol? Well, yeah, every Friday night, the guys at the factory, we'd all go out, and every Friday night we'd drink beer. We get our paychecks and we drink beer for 2-3 hours and then go home. We'd all be kind of stewed every Friday night, drinking beer. Okay. But what they didn't ask was, were you getting peanuts? What was happening was the bars, they were giving them peanuts for free to eat while they're drinking their beer. Those are the ones that all the guys went to because they're getting free peanuts to eat with their beer. And it's not the alcohol in the whiskey or the wine or the beer that was causing liver cancer. It was the aflatoxins in the fungus, Aspergillus flavus, that had infested the peanuts. And I got it figured out, wrote it all up, and that's published in the International Zoo Yearbook. It's about 1967, 68, International Zoo Yearbook that was published. And it freaked everybody out around the world.